Hi everyone! In this video, I will be covering the solution to Leetcode number 238, which is also called Move Zeros. So let's begin by looking at the problem statement. Given an integer array nums, we want to move all zeros to the end of it while maintaining the relative order of the non-zero elements. We're also given that we must do this in place without making a copy of the array. So let's look at an example to better understand the problem. So here we are given an input of an array called nums with the values 0, 1, 0, 3, and 12. And you can see that in the output, we have an array where all of the zeros are at the end and the non-zero elements are at the beginning in the same order. So how exactly can we solve this problem, especially without making a copy of the array? Well, we know that as we iterate through the array from left to right, we want to take the non-zero elements and put them at the beginning. So as we iterate through this array, whenever we encounter a non-zero element, we want to put it at the start. So in this case, the first non-zero element we encounter is 1. So we would put it at index 0. And then we continue iterating. The second non-zero element we encounter is 3. So we would put it at index 1. And then the third non-zero element we encounter is 12. And so we would put it at index 2. And then we would replace the remaining elements with 0. So in order to implement a solution, we will need a variable that will keep track of at what index can we put the next non-zero value at. So I'm going to create a variable and call it index, and I'm going to initialize it to 0. And this is because the first non-zero element we encounter, we would want to put that at index 0, at the beginning of the array. And we know that as we continue replacing elements, we would want to increase index by 1. So now let me go through this example again using this variable so you can see how it works. So we're going to iterate through from left to right. And so again, our first non-zero element would be 1, and we would place it at index 0. And then we would increase the index variable by 1. And then our next non-zero element would be 3, and we would put it at index 1. And then we would increase index by 1, so now it is 2. And then finally, we would look at our last element, which is also a non-zero value, 12, and we would put it at index 2, and we would increase this index variable by 1. From here, we can use the index variable once again, because we know that the remaining elements from indexes 3 to the end of the array must all be zeros. Okay, so let me summarize how the solution will work. First, we will create a variable index and initialize it to 0. Then we want to iterate through the array elements from left to right. And if the array element nums of I is non-zero, we're going to set nums of index to nums of I. And then we're also going to increase the index variable by 1. And then we will iterate through the array elements from index to the end of the array. And we're going to set all of these elements at these indexes to 0. So now I'm going to be going over the code for this problem. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called index and set it equal to 0. Then I'm going to create a for loop that iterates through the array or vector nums. I know that if nums of I is not equal to 0, so if it's non-zero, then I want to set nums of index equal to nums of I, and I want to increase index by 1. And then I want to iterate from index to the end of the array and set all of those elements to 0. And if I submit this solution, I get that it works.